Billy Martin is one name that can never be lost in the shuffle of Major League history. The man was famous and will always be known across the baseball world as a tough ball player, an even tougher manager, and most prominently as one of the most controversial figures the game has ever seen. Sure, he isn't the only Yankee star to play and coach at the club. However, it's his antics both on and off the field that saw him become one of the most memorable figures to have ever represented the team at any level. But then, what was it about Billy that always attracted the spotlight? And why is he still remembered even decades after his death? Born on May 16, 1926 in Berkeley, California, Alfred Martin Jr., as he was originally called, developed a strong interest in the game from a very young age. However, it was mostly because of his older brother Tudo, who was a ball player himself and who usually took young Martin to the games he played in. Also, Billy himself confessed that his initial interest in sports was an attempt to escape his much-troubled childhood. Nevertheless, as Billy's talent developed over time, it became clear that baseball would become more of a part of his poverty-stricken neighborhood in West Berkeley. His development was pretty quick thanks to his natural abilities and competitive character, and at the age of 18, he was already playing in the minor leagues with Idaho Falls. However, his start to life in professional baseball didn't get off to the brightest of starts. In fact, he struggled for much of his time with the team in 1946, and only managed a .254 average while playing third base. He was eventually shipped off to the arid Southwest, where he played for the Class C Phoenix Senators in the Arizona-Texas League. But then, it was there that he finally found his footing, and by the end of the '47 season, he had completely dominated the entire league, even securing the Player of the Season award with a whopping average of .393. In a stroke of good fortune, Billy would find himself heading to New York in 1949, even after enduring two barely average seasons with the Oakland Oaks. For many, however, it was a much-predicted reunion with Stengel, who had been poached by the Yankees in the previous season. But it all didn't matter to Billy because, well, he was right where he wanted to be, and even better, he now had his Major League debut in sight. In New York, Billy quickly won over his teammates with his hard work and desire to learn. He finally felt at home, and quite frankly, with a coach who loved him and teammates who appreciated him, it's easy to see why. The now 24-year-old would finally make his long-awaited debut on the opening day of the 1950 season, and the rest, as they say, is history. Billy eventually became a key player for the great Yankee teams of the 50s, acting as the spark plug that powered the team to victories. However, for all his abilities, Billy Martin was most notorious for his bold and fearless personality that saw him relish the opportunity to get into brawls with opponents who he clashed with. He was confident, but he also had a hint of brashness that meant he always had his fists clenched and was ready for the next fight. Regardless, Martin was nothing short of pivotal for the Yankees in his 7 years with the club, but the highlight of his career was probably his showing in the 1953 World Series. His 12 hits in the series were mind-blowing, but it was his 23 total bases that really got everyone talking. He had just shattered the great Babe Ruth's record of 19 total bases in the series, leading the Yankees to what was their 5th consecutive title. It was also fitting that he clinched the series' Most Valuable Player award for his extraordinary outing. When Billy Martin eventually left the Yankees in 1957, it was on the back of many controversies, which was not so surprising considering his fiery personality. But even then, the fans still adored him for always giving it all for the club, and no amount of on or off-field brawls could change that. By 1962, he was truly past his prime and would eventually retire from playing at the age of 33. Billy Martin's illustrious playing career may have ended much sooner than he would have imagined, but then it also made way for the beginning of a new era, which was Billy's more controversial managerial era. For Martin, leaving the Major League Baseball entirely was never in the cards. After all, it's what he had known all his life, and perhaps it's where he was meant to be too. So it didn't take long for him to jump back on the wagon, but this time as a backroom staff for the Minnesota Twins, where he briefly functioned as a scout. However, he was soon handed a more active role as he was appointed as the new third base coach before the start of the 1965 season. He was back in the game for good, but something seemed different about the new Billy Martin. Sure, he was still the same old aggressive Billy, but he somehow managed to keep his drinking problem in check and his nose out of trouble. Now this was great news for the Twins, and it even got better when the players started to improve massively thanks to Billy's impact. In no time, results followed on an upward trajectory, with the team not only turning into a contender overnight, but also going on to win the American League pennant. And even though they ultimately lost the 1965 World Series to the Los Angeles Dodgers in Game 7, it was still a superb finish, and Billy Martin had a big hand in it. At this point, rumors even started to spread that the Californian might just be primed for the managerial position. But then, everything changed in the next season when the old Billy struck again, and quite literally too. Just when everyone was starting to believe that he may have finally gotten his life together, he got into a spat with the team's travel secretary, and before anyone could say jack, Martin had knocked out his opponent with a good old boxing punch to the face. Perhaps it is true that old habits never die, and with one swing of the fist, Martin undid all the good work he's done over the past year. Of course, Billy still got his shot as manager eventually, but he had to wait 2 extra years to finally get the role of manager for the Denver Bears. For now, it didn't matter that the Bears were a much smaller affiliate of the Twins. For Billy, it was a chance to show he had what it took to manage a baseball team, and boy did he do just that. You see, at the end of his stint with the Bears, he had several teams trying to sign him, but Billy maintained that he was loyal to the Twins and would wait for their offer to come. Well, with the Minnesota Twins going through a tough patch at the time and needing someone to help turn the tide around, there was only one man they could turn to, and so began Billy's major league career as a manager. Billy Martin's managing style was centered around aggressive baseball, just like the same style that he himself embodied during his playing days. Well, it pretty much worked for him because step by step, he climbed up the managerial ladder until he was back where he belonged in New York City. Billy's personality didn't really change much from what he exhibited in his playing days. He was the same old controversial Billy. However, the Yankees ignored the consequences and went all in for his signature in 1975. And with the Yankees, Billy enjoyed immense success unlike anywhere else in his managerial career. He even led the team to 2 consecutive American League pennants in 1976 and 1977, ultimately winning his only World Series as a manager in 1977. But in addition to his success with the Yankees, he also had more controversies there than anywhere else. Turns out it was true what one of his former employees once said: hiring Martin is like sitting on a drum of dynamite, you never know what to expect. In New York, Martin was almost unstoppable both on and off the field, and he just knew how to stay in the spotlight for both the right and wrong reasons. It was easily Billy's world, and everyone else just lived in it. However, his relationship with George Steinbrenner, who was the then owner of the Yankees, was as toxic relationships can ever go. They almost couldn't stand each other, but it seemed like they also couldn't do without each other. Well, the summary of this relationship is highlighted by the fact that, like it or not, Martin operated as manager of the Yankees a whopping 5 times. Yeah, you heard that right. 5 different times he was hired by Steinbrenner, and all 5 times he was either sacked or forced to resign for the most controversial reasons. In fact, in his 5 stints as manager of the Yankees, he only lasted more than a year once, and that was in his first stint with the team. See, it's almost impossible to highlight the peak of his controversies during his time with the Yankees, but you can't just overlook the time he almost got in a fistfight with his slugger Reggie on national TV. It was so bad that Martin had to be held back from assaulting his own player during a game, and that wasn't even the end of it. Other times, he was seen indulging in heated spats with opposing coaches, members of his staff, and umpires. With Martin, it was a case of never being able to outrun your demons because wherever he went, trouble followed. Oh, and even when he wasn't busy making trouble on the field, Billy took it upon himself to always pick up a fight or two after getting drunk at bars every other night. There was just no separating the man from the controversies, not in his playing days and certainly not in his managerial career either. Apart from his time with the Yankees, where he spent most of his coaching career, Billy also held managerial roles at several other MLB franchises. In fact, he was never unemployed for long before another team that needed his quick fix came calling. But then, the theme of his stints at these teams often followed a particular pattern. He would take a bad team and make them good, then run them back into the ground before getting fired before his 3rd season. It also didn't help that he had a thing for ruining relationships with his employers. After his initial spell with the Minnesota Twins, Billy Martin moved to the Detroit Tigers, where he spent 3 roller coaster years before being suspended by the AL in 1973 for ordering his players to throw spitballs and then bragging about it after. He was eventually fired before his suspension ran out, but was snapped up by the Texas Rangers almost immediately. In Texas, he was tasked with rebuilding a team that was mediocre at best, but it was no big deal for him because that's what he did best. After a relatively average first season, Martin once again waved his magic wand, and the Rangers became title contenders overnight. However, they would eventually finish second that season before dropping off again the next season. As typical of Martin, he started to brew problems with almost every staff member on the team, which ultimately led to more controversies and his eventual firing in 1975. Martin also had a short stint with the Oakland Athletics between 1980 and 1982, where he lifted the struggling team. Well, as if scripted again, his time with the A's also ended with his firing in 1983, after a series of unacceptable off-field shenanigans. However, rumors had it that he intentionally got himself fired because he was promised his old job as the Yankee manager. To be fair, Billy Martin may have been a headache for his employers, players, umpires, and just about anyone he worked with. But there's no denying that he was a valuable asset to the game both in his playing and coaching days. That's why the news of his death in a tragic car accident in 1989 sent shockwaves down the spines of many baseball fans across the world. Of course, his violent and brash personality left much to be desired, but at no point was his dedication to winning ever questioned. In fact, the man was sometimes guilty of being too dedicated, and that simply made him more erratic. In his 16 seasons as an MLB manager, Martin won 5 division titles, 2 pennants, and 1 World Series. Of course, it was hard to look beyond his controversies, but one thing is certain, and it's the fact that Major League Baseball was never the same without Billy Martin.